Okay, with the writer, director, producer of The Commuter, a 10-minute film played at the Thriller Suspense Festival. A lot of drama aspects to it. It's a little bit of a twist. I love the concept. I want to talk to you right from the beginning because you talked about in your blog interview about how you wanted to do a short film on the cheap. That was your words, I guess, right? You wanted to make a cheap,
Yeah.
effective 10-minute short film that didn't cost you that much money, I guess, right?
Mhm.
And that's how you wrote the script.
Yeah. So I think the for a lot of filmmakers, especially so I went to film school, and a lot of the people I know since then, they sort of taper off making their own films. And I think usually it's because they uh they tend to look at certain obstacles. The biggest one is usually the cost of making a short film. That usually stands in the way of them continuing to do their own things. And so from the beginning, I've always tried to see what I can do with as little as possible. And so when you have that mindset, a lot of times you're um, looking around at certain, whether it's locations or ideas, certain
Yeah.
things you can do on the on the low in terms of costs. And so for me at least, whether it's through college or working at my job, um, I've been commuting for the last 8 years, and so on one, so there was this old this sort of old school train station that I was really drawn to, and at some point I had an idea of I could probably this would be a good location to shoot a short film around, just because what I ended up realizing is when making the film is that you're in a public space, so there's this cinematic quality to it. You have people around you. However,
Yeah.
everybody's distracted by their commutes. And so you don't have to worry about people looking at the camera. And so that was the jumping off point, was the setting. And then the the next thing that come to mind was that, well, if I'm going to tell a story about train station or commuting, it should probably be um, a stressful story, because
Yeah.
that's been my experience for the most part.
So you kind of, it's like you're like quote unquote stealing the location, like an excellent location. So you're getting great production design for free, I guess.
Yeah, whatever it takes to, try to do what you can
Yeah.
with as little.
So where did you, where was the train station? Was it in New Jersey?
Yeah, it's the Hoboken train station.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
so
then, yeah. And everybody's mostly commuting to the city, I guess, right? From that train station?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we shot it around noon for a few days, and at that point, that was, I think originally I wanted to shoot it during rush hour just to give it more of a
Yeah.
energy, but I think that around noon ended up being the perfect time, because it was this little there wasn't too much going on, so you could still do your thing without too many distractions.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, what we learned is people are sometimes when you shoot in public, people come up to you, or people want to know, people are curious what's going on.
Yeah.
And with this, people are in a rush, so they almost don't have time to really try to find out what's going on.
So well, it's even better for your film because basically the concept is that she misses her train, right? Her 5 o'clock train. So then everybody got on that train, so it's going to be a little bit emptier because she missed it, right? So she's got to wait an hour to the next train. So, and then so then obviously then that kind of sets up the plot of the film. And then of course she's got like a voiceover. So you think she's talking to her boyfriend, you don't know, like, or talking to somebody. So there's kind of the mystery element to like what happens next. That said, we're at the same time we relate to this character, right? Like she's got a shitty job, but you have to like commute to it. It's like, and then of course you miss something. You miss your like your flight or your train. In this case, your train. So we all have a universal kind of like understanding of like this character, I guess, right?
Yeah. for sure. That was always you know, I said this before, but when I first envisioned like doing this at a train station, immediately these things came to mind where, you know, I've been in her shoes plenty of times, so I have experience with the stress of trying to catch the train, um, and then just the grueling, especially a lot of times these train, you know, there's usually like an hour, sometimes a half hour in between each departure, and so especially when you want to go home, that becomes a really grueling hour.
Yeah,
Uh, and so yeah, and I think a lot of times when I come up with these I with like an idea for you know a story I want to tell, it usually there's always a genre in the beginning that I have in mind. For this, it was definitely something in terms of like a classic noir, where usually in you know the old style noirs, you kind of it's a relatable character who kind of just finds themselves in one of these situations that's usually much bigger than themselves, and they have to scramble to get out of it. And then I guess the twist with that was she's it's an unreliable narrator story, so she's very much controlling not just what her boyfriend knows, but what the audience knows.
yeah,
And and yeah, so once all that came together, you know, the rest of the in terms of writing and directing everything made sense from that point on.
yeah. No, 100%. And then Great Lakes, like, because people who don't know, this is mostly even the exteriors are shot. That's shot in Hoboken.
I guess.
Yeah. So Great look like you. It's funny because it's like New York City has been shot to death, right? Like, meaning that like every nook and cranny of the city has been shot, Brooklyn included, Queens. But this is some really nice style, and people don't know Hoboken's like right. It's the city that looks into the skyline, right? It's like it's the Jersey city
Yeah.
that's like right there, right? From New York City. Is that where you're from?
I'm about like a probably like a 20-minute drive from
Okay.
Hoboken. Usually like I have family in Hoboken, I have friends in Hoboken, so I'm constantly in that
Yeah.
area. And especially for college, I went to school in Brooklyn, and I usually I would take the train and then hop on the subways. Whenever there were issues with the trains, they would direct us to Hoboken. And so that's when I would find myself there. And you know, when you're waiting there, you have time to look around and you
Yeah.
start to notice, you know, that it's a very cool looking
Yeah.
old style train station.
That they keep like obviously it must be like crazy traffic, but they keep up with it, right? Like it's almost has the what's the train station in New York City, the 42nd. It has that kind
Uh,
of old style like train.
yeah, Grand Central.
Grand Central, yeah, yeah, has that kind of, but they keep up with it, right? Sometimes these train stations can get, if they don't like do anything with it, they can become pretty crappy pretty quickly, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think there's plans to. I think they want to renovate it soon,
Yeah.
so it's a good thing I got it in now before they overhaul it too drastically.
So you got this idea, and you kind of how to have a few characters, kind of like quote unquote stole the locations, but you like you know what I mean. You didn't have. I'm assuming you didn't
Yeah,
have permits. You got like, but at the same time, you're not bothering anybody, right? So they're not doing anything illegally. And then so you just brought your actors in, and you kind of shot like run and gun. I'm assuming, right?
yeah. So you know, when you're first playing this out, you always you don't really think. I didn't start thinking of what could go wrong up until I'm on my way and the actors are on their way.
Yeah,
And so the first day on my way, I was a little nervous because you start thinking, well, what if they come up to you and say, "Sorry, you can't shoot here." Now, all this planning went into this. Now, what do you do? But no, they were very, as far as the the train station itself, the employees there, they didn't bother us. There was one moment where somebody went up to us, but they were more curious about what we were doing rather
Sure.
than giving us problems. There's a college right by Stevens.
Yeah.
They asked us, they're like, "Oh, are you film students from Stevens?" I was like, "Yeah," just in case
Sure. Yeah.
there's
That's
any
an easy
problems with
way to
it.
do it, right? Yeah.
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 Re the real pro I guess the only it's funny because the for the most part it was pretty seamless. We had no issues. Somebody was actually recording a music video one day over by the tracks.
Okay.
So at that point, I just assumed, okay, they must they must not care too much about bothering anybody. But the the very first shot we did was in the lobby where our actress was she was just to sit at the bench and look bored. And when that happened, there was somebody who um was I guess one of the homeless people there went up to her, and at that point I realized, oh, okay, that's something I can't take into account for whether like the other people coming up to us, but she handled it like a pro. It was uh from the because I asked her, I was like, you okay? She's like, "Yeah, totally."
Yeah.
And then from that point on it was just easy breezy.
So I was you shot the film, you did the sound, like this is like almost like a one man show, which is great. Because you obviously have the skills to do this, pull this off. But obviously you need a an actor. You need someone to
Yeah,
pull off the
that
emotions
I
of the
can't
scene.
do.
And she's fantastic. And like you said, that she got the voiceover, but then she's just a lot of times she's reacting. There's the great scene on the bench, which it looks like it was freezing outside when you're shooting that, which is great because she's like shaking like while the scene's going on, which is like makes her performance even better. But where did you find her? Where did you find your actor?
Um, so that's Bianca Linder.
Yeah.
Uh, she was going to school. I believe the new school. She might have transferred since, but yeah, I just found her on Backstage. I put a bunch of people auditioned, and I thought, yeah, it's always auditioning actors is always a little tough because it's you know a lot of times it's hard to kind of envision somebody like because it's a Zoom or like a webcam video of like a take. It's
Yeah.
usually it's somebody's bedroom, and you always have to look for certain qualities that kind of stick out. Especially since you're typically not directing the auditions, they're submitting it to you, and so
Yeah.
and sometimes you kind of like that. You want to see what somebody's bringing to it. And as for her, there was a real like urgency to her performance that I really liked. And then once I once we started going back and forth over it, a lot of times it what it ultimately comes down to with or at least from my experience for the actors I hire is it's usually in the conversations with them and whether you can get along with somebody because filmmaking is very tough,
Yeah.
and especially when there's no budget, it's a one-man crew
Yeah.
and everything's very very guerrilla style. You need who would somebody who not only can handle it but would thrive off that, which I think she did. And she was very passionate and she was very into the character, and that's what you want.
Yeah. She seemed like, yeah, she was like, and she has that, she nails that kind of like frustration. Like I need some excitement in my life. I need to change things, right? So I like the aspect too of like how in our modern world where like my cell phone's dead and I have to wait and like it's like we and now I have to now it's my time to think. where
Yeah.
I'm probably projecting a little bit, but it's like I love that idea where like because in our generation, your generation especially, like you guys are always on your phone. Like you have the phone, like you grew up on your phone, so it's like there's not that nobody has that time where like they're by themselves with their own thoughts, I guess. I like that aspect in the script.
Yeah, and you know what too, is sometimes even when I have my phone, sometimes it's, you can only scroll through messages or, social media for so long. Eventually, whether it's to save battery life or
Yeah.
just even, but sometimes you need to kind of look up and kind of, look around for a bit. And that's sometime, I would be waiting for an hour, whether it was
Yeah.
I missed my train or there was a delay. And you become a voyeur where you start kind of looking around, looking at other people and, what they're doing. And
Everybody's on their
um,
phones. It's like you brought up the
exactly,
beginning,
yeah.
but you brought up the beginning where like everybody's in a rush, but at the same time, everybody's like when you're commuting, everybody's on their phone, so they're not paying attention to anything.
Yeah. And the other thing too is a lot of times people are specifically on their phone to avoid people
Sure.
because
Yeah.
I know I do that sometimes where, you know, it, when you're commuting, there's certain, whether it's like people asking for money or just sometimes people doing you'll always come across people who might need something, and there's always I specifically will wear earphones just because it's a even if I'm not listening to music, sometimes it's just a way of sorry I can't hear you, or I look
Sure.
down at my phone kind of like I'm not paying attention. I think a lot of people do that where they kind of close themselves off to everybody.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
Oh,
it's a
yeah,
thing.
you're
Yeah.
right.
It's a thing, I guess, right? But have you know just a quick segue, have you noticed this like from be pre-COVID to post-COVID commuting, is it different?
I think I think there's less now than there was
People?
before.
Okay.
Although I do think it's started to return to pre-COVID because I've noticed I think now it seemed like in around like 2021 uh it was I think a lot of people were only working from home. What
Yeah.
I've noticed now, whether it's just noticing it in bus stations or train stations or even just people I know, I think now people are at the very least doing a hybrid
Yeah.
schedule. And so I've noticed usually whether it's like Monday or a Friday might be a little quiet, but you'll have a few days in the middle of the week where it seems to really pick up in terms of the amount of people.
Yeah. So then you had your lead actor who's in every scene, and then I liked even the editing where you had the wallet at the beginning, which is a key. I'm not going to give anything away, but there's a wallet is a key part of this. You kind of showed it at the beginning of the film, kind of like as like, okay, this is not like you showed the idea. It's like, okay, then you kind of set up what's going to happen next, right? So it's not like it's like there's a plot coming up, I guess, right? Like there's something's going to happen, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's something that really that happened later on, that idea of setting it up. I think in the beginning, I think I wanted to just open up with black, and then the first thing you would see would be her rushing through uh the train station, and then when I would show the script, you know, one or two people pointed out, it's probably not the best idea to have a solid minute of just a black screen, and that's when I realized, well, you could set up
Yeah,
what the twist is going to be in those moments. And that's the thing. Like a lot of uh, I think really when it comes to the editing state, like anytime you're doing one of these twists, endings, I think a lot of the foreshadowing, you get more and more ideas in the edit because sometimes when you're writing it and you're looking at a block of text, it's always tough to kind of visualize these things.
yeah,
Whereas when you're at least for me, I'm a very visual person. So when I see it in front of me, I would suddenly get ideas of how to, uh, you know, how to quickly insert these shots to kind of cue in these ideas that I'm going to play with later on.
So you did the editing and the sound design yourself as well?
Yeah. Um, I I think the only thing I didn't really do is the acting and then the score.
The score? Okay.
Um,
Is-
yeah, uh, Philip Sobin did the score, he did a very good one. And obviously the actors did a really good job. Other than that, though, it was very much me holding a camera on my own with a. I didn't even have a shoulder rig. It's a slider
Yeah.
that I realized I can. It's got it's got legs on it, so you can place it somewhere. I can just place it on my shoulder, and then that I use this sound equipment now has become easier and easier to use on the gun. So I uh, the Rode wireless labs that were just introduced a few years ago, those came in handy. They work like an absolute charm. And then once I got in the like I work in post production. So for me it's the most exciting part when I get to bring it into post because that's
Okay.
where the film really starts to come alive at that point.
Yeah.
Um,
So what do you
and
do and what do you do like is like your day job is like you work in post-production?
Yeah, so I work at Technicolor Postworks, where like they do a bunch of like movies and TV shows, and so I'll help out with like different departments, like the color department and the editors and the sound people, and so um, by doing that over the years, you start to pick up on a bunch of tips and learn more about the post-production process, which really also informs the filming of it because then you know of certain things to look out for when you're on set because there's a lot of times where people I, on set there's a lot of mistakes that they ask us
To
if we could
fix?
fix it in
Yeah.
post and so you start to pick up on certain things to look out for.
Well, that's great. So you learn a lot. And plus you have the tools to edit your own film, I guess, right? Like sound design is as an art form and you seem to really I know you kind of grabbed a lot of onset that you grabbed a lot of onset sound and then kind of used it for the sound design.
Yeah. And then just also playing around with it. I think what I've learned over the years because I went to film school at Pratt and so um, the way they would do it there is whether regardless of what you wanted to go into, they made you do focus on all aspects. So you would have to do, writing, even if you wanted to be a cinematographer or vice versa. And so
Yeah.
um, you, whether I liked it or not, I had to become sort of an all-in-one filmmaker. And a lot of times too is people are making their own things and they're showing it to you and asking what you think of it. And so the thing I learned the most from that experience was that sound is very important. I think visual if you have if the if the visual like the visual aspect of your short film is on the lower end, whether you're shooting with a cheap camera or maybe you don't have good
Yeah.
you can't afford a good production design, you can typically get away with that. But I think sound is just something that, you know, even if we don't notice it, I think our brains notice it where
Yeah.
that's the most important thing. And so I've always made sure I think you can if a shot is too soft, it's more forgiving than unclear audio or even just I think you could really have fun in sound design and really start to layer the setting and especially with this with shooting at the train station I wanted it to feel like this very intimidating and stressful environment and especially when you're shooting at noon and there's not too many people, you really need to rely on your sound design to emphasize
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you nailed it. Like it's a very, especially for this kind of genre and plot where you're kind of leading up to the twists and turns and like kind of yeah, you're really kind of not being over the top about it. It's very subtle. It's said suits the theme, I guess it's of the film. So, yeah. So yeah, she's great in it in the film. You got that key scene on the bench. Like I said, was it cold? Because it seems very cold.
You know what? I think that was shot in the spring. I think that's just her acting very well. I think
Okay.
there was there might have been some breeze. I think um there were a few pickup shots we do where she was by the water, like looking at the wallet. I think
Yeah.
that day might have been cold, but them on the bench, that I think the weather was fine. I think if I remember right, that was shot last in
Yeah.
because I think now the film's we shot that I think a year it's a year old now. So
Yeah.
uh yeah, the weather was fine. I think that's just her being a really good actress and really trying to sell the situation she's in.
What did she think of the film when she saw it?
She was very impressed. It's funny because w what I noticed too, like when I was showing people the script, I think they didn't really. I think when you read it on paper, you don't really. A lot of the actors weren't really understanding the twist,
Yeah.
and I ended up giving them a write-up explaining it to them, just because I think that the actor should always be in on it because it helps them, especially she can start queuing up sort of these little red herrings in her
Yeah.
performance, kind of hint at where things are going. So when you finally see the film, because I think sometimes, especially with with the wallet, it's very visual, and I think sometimes you got to see it for yourself to really understand what was being set up.
Yeah.
Because even the conversation she has with her boyfriend, uh, it's I didn't show it just because I wanted to kind of emphasize this idea that she's only going to show you what she wants to show you.
Yeah.
And I think when the actors were reading it, I think they were a little confused about it at first, but once you actually see it, it suddenly makes more sense.
Yeah, 100%. So you guys sent out the festivals. I thought your film was great when I first saw it. I thought that
Oh, thank you.
yeah, when I was like, yeah, this is good. This is like very subtle and everything, although kind of working. And it seems like you got the all the tools to make other films like this, meaning that you got the equipment, you got the expertise, and like you said, the sound, like new sound devices. Are you gonna make more like films like this? I'm saying you should,
I
but
Yeah, I think I think the goal is the next one would be like a more of a feature length,
okay,
just because you know up to this point I've only done like shorts, and I think that's the conventional way to
yeah,
approach this. But yeah, I think that the way I looked at this too was for a 10-minute short, let's see what this would end up costing me. What are the headaches involved with
yeah,
making 10 minutes? And so now that I've figured out what it would look like to do a 10-minute film, now the next step would maybe be something that's, 80 minutes or
yeah.
90 minutes,
You
or
got a
maybe even
story? You
less.
got an idea or like a script?
Yeah, I'm working on things. It would probably be like something like a genre
Yeah.
piece. But yeah, I'm working on it now. Hopefully I have something ready to go within the next year because I would like to continue the mo you do get this sort of momentum after finishing something like this,
Yeah.
especially like when you're doing it on your own, it's very easy to get lazy and to procrastinate, and so I want to continue that momentum.
Yeah, 100%. So before we leave you, well, by the way, I wish you the best of success with it. I think that you're
Oh, thank
ready
you.
for it. And yeah, something like this. And it's like, obviously, it's like a huge enterprise doing a feature, but I think that like even this script can be, you can see it like almost like a proof of concept. You can see this as a feature. So with different elements, like you can go to her work and, all these little extra elements of the script, like her boyfriend, more of a character, you know what I mean? Like there's something
Yeah,
there, right?
yeah,
For sure. So
yeah. There's definitely pieces.
before we leave you, we always ask people on the blog interview what film they watched the most times in their life. Do you remember what you said?
Ooh. Um, oh, I think I did answer this.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, maybe something from. I'm a big Stanley Kubrick guy, so
yeah.
maybe something like The Shining
Yeah,
is
you
something
said
I've
The
seen a
Shining.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably it. It would have to be something that's on TV a lot because I'm usually flipping through the channels, and that's always a move. If I see that, I gotta stop on that.
So, but then, like The Shining, obviously was made long before, way before you were born. Do you remember who introduced you to Kubrick? Like when you first got like involved in like watching his films?
Well, I think The Shining's one of those movies where you kind of there. I feel like even though it came out in 1980, when you're growing up, there's like the classic horror movies, whether it's Halloween or there's always these movies you hear about, and especially I have an older sister, I have older cousins,
Yeah.
so there's always a movie I heard about from them as well, and I watched it a few times when I was younger, but then when I started getting into movies and suddenly I got into Kubrick. Yeah, it's funny. Even though The Shining is the first movie I saw, the real way I got introduced to Stanley Kubrick was my grandmother was watching 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I remember walking in on it and thinking, "What the hell is this?" And I had to sit down and watch it with her because um, I think it was towards the end where the movie starts to get really crazy,
Yeah.
and then I went back and rewatched that, and it was one of those movies where when I saw it in full, I didn't really get it at first, but I kept thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then finally, I watched it a few more times, and it's a it. I find a lot of his work is very hypnotizing, and so that's when you go down a rabbit hole. You want to know who made this
Yeah.
movie, and you become very fascinated by not just their work, but just
Yeah.
how they think. Um,
Well, like
so
look at
yeah,
he did sci-fi, he did, how would you describe Clockwork Orange, I guess, dystopian or
I guess you do the sci-fi elements. It's set in the future. But and that's it's funny you bring that up because that's actually I think some of my like favorite filmmakers like Kubrick or some of the like newer people like Christopher Nolan or you can name a bunch of people. I like when filmmakers jump genres.
yeah, that's what
Um,
I was gonna say. He jumps genres, right? Like he did period piece,
yeah,
he did Shining's a horror, right? Like, yeah,
yeah, it's always fascinating because you want to see uh what their stamp on that genre is, and plus it's so yeah, like I for me it's like I really like all kinds of movies, and so it's always something where just from yeah, there are some people who probably like only want to make horror movies or only want to make crime movies. For me, it's I like seeing all different genres, so I naturally am always interested in what if I were to make a horror or a crime or a western or whatever, what would that look like?
yeah, yeah, 100%. Well, I wish you the ultimate best of success with your film career. And I don't know, did you like you're from New Jersey, so I'm assuming you're Italian. I'm assuming you watch a little bit of Sopranos. I'm sorry, it's
Oh
a
yeah.
cliche question, but
It,
yeah,
no, it was actually where I live. It's shot in that area, and then
yeah.
David Chase, the creator, uh, we went to the same high school.
Okay, gotcha.
So at our high school, one of our famous, you know, if you were to rank the famous alumni, he's probably at the top.
Yeah. So there's like
So
I'm sure he's a little bit polarizing too to Italian Americans. Like some love it, but then some are like the stereotype and
no, I think for the most part we love it because there's a lot of there's a lot of small details in it that
sure. Yeah.
you're not used to see, especially when you're from uh the area. Uh, there's a lot of small details that are they're really accurate. Just it's really exciting to see it
Yeah. Well,
like in a
just the
TV show.
culture. Like for me, like I'm half Italian, but I'm from Niagara Falls and everybody was Italian where I grew up. And just the culture, like he kind of nailed that kind of like, you know, Western kind of like Americana Italian, like not really Italian, but they're Italian, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like they're that, yeah. The
yeah,
munja
and
cake is
even
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and even besides that, I just think the writing of that
Yeah.
show it's just incredible, especially that I think what he does with all those characters, and there's a bunch of themes, and it's about you could it's a story about mobsters, but it's also a story about like essentialism and depression. It's a very interesting balance
About
of
capitalism. Yeah. It's a
yeah,
show about
exactly,
like
yeah,
the fall, the rise and fall of capitalism. Like, because everything they do is like is bad, of course, and they're terrible people. Everybody lies, but it's a jumping off point of like what's already terrible, right? Like so
yeah,
they're just making something more terrible than what it is, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
yeah, totally.
So, all right, man. Well, congratulations, and love to see what you do next, and keep in touch. And looking forward to seeing your next film.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.